Muy buenos días, seguimos en la mañana y nos encontramos ahora en la segunda.
Good morning. Welcome to our second session of our second day. Be reminded, especially those of you joining us through streaming and those who have just joined our Congress, that we have three different rooms because there are very many topics because the localization agenda on humanitarian action, localization of humanitarian action forces us to discuss many topics. Room one, we have financing for resilience. Should you be interested? Then room two, we have humanitarian journalism, responsible narratives in crisis coverage. Each room has time, I'm sorry, has space for about 30 people. So the whole Congress is building, transforming, reflecting, and contributing to the collective memoirs. Here in the main hall, Felix de Restrepo Hall at Javeriana University, we are going to have this meeting called Innovative Strategies and Emerging Practices for Financial Sustainability in Localization. The question would be for each one of us, how can we achieve and make sure that local processes be sustainable throughout time? How can they be sustainable? And I mean financially, given the scarcity of resources that we experience in cooperation, and how can we make them independent, long-term, and empowered? That's why this conversation seeks to open the door to those new views, to new approaches on a topic that is more and more determinant to humanitarian action, which is financial sustainability in localization. Now, from different countries, different experiences, views, our panelists will be sharing this morning some innovative strategies and emerging practices that are transforming the way that we mobilize resources today, how to build alliances, strategies, how to consolidate work long term at the local level. I'm joined by, and I invite them to come up on stage at this moment, Katherin Huertas from Doctors Without Borders. Welcome, Katherin. Thank you for being here and contributing to this Congress. Then online, because this Congress is global and international, we have Andrea Imbroglia from AEDROS. She she's joined remotely. Hope that she can hear us from Bogota, Colombia. And then we've got Fernando Jinete from the foundation called Star Education Foundation. He'll be joining shortly. This panel will have the privilege to be moderated by Manuel Huapaya from Cáritas, Peru, who will invite us to reflect on the challenges and the opportunities. Again, it's resources scarcity, scarce opportunity, scarce mobility, financial sustainability. Manuel, thank you for being here and enjoy the panel. Remember to get your questions ready. You can participate at the end of the panel. Go ahead, Manuel. Thank you very much, Diana, and good day to everyone. I'm happy to share this time with you. I'm also thankful for the invitation to the Localization Congress. The topic at hand, as Diana put it, is the search for innovative strategies about the sustainability. In the end, what we have come to share with you, these are spaces and possibilities in everything that it entails to gather resources and funds. We've heard since yesterday when the representatives of the German embassy introduced himself and talked here, how the topic of the decreasing resources coming from outside is a reality. It's a constant reality. And it's not going to increase. The scarcity is growing. There will be fewer and fewer resources. So When doors are closed, then God opens a window. We've seen and heard, might have heard this in a movie, especially those of us who are older. It's a reality of time. I dare say that there are three signs we need to look into. The first one is even Jesus himself, he invites us to see this, to know that we need to have one hand looking at the time, to listen to the signals of time. One of the signals of time is this, that the gathering funds or international financing is reducing, is shrinking. The other thing is that the fund collection process is a process that entails investment. If we want to strengthen that, we must invest first to find resources. It's an investment to get investments. And I'm telling you, based on knowledge, we at Cáritas Peru, we've gone after that. It's an investment that we have to make. We must make, either if you are a small, middle, or big organization. We'll need to do that. And then we need to take into account three aspects. The first one is that it's a process that demands time. The second thing is that this is a process that teaches us with patience because it's not always quick. And the third thing is that we should not be afraid of failing. That's important because, we fall and stand, fall and rise until we find the way. And the third thing that I like to say is that it's part of the process of localization. We, through this chance to gather funds and resources, yesterday we heard about the different workshops. Many of them said, how can we execute projects that will actually be of the interest to the communities after hearing the voices of the community? Well, if we go after fund collection or resources collection, we can do it ourselves and we're going to be able to direct and lead. It's something that we need to establish. The other things that we need to be responsible, co-responsibles with our communities in our own countries. And the other thing is that this will help us establish a resource optimization pathway. I'm not going to speak anymore because there are more experts here. There are specialists. We have Katherin, who's coming from Doctors Without Borders, Fernando from the Foundation, called Estrella in Spanish. It's called Star in English. And Andrea Imbroglia, she's the director of AEDROS. I want to thank them for being here, and we'll give the floor to Andrea so that she tell us. Before anything else, I forgot the topic to discuss. Includes two questions. They're very important to bear in mind, or two topics. First thing is a general view as to why we need sustainable funding. And the second thing is that not only do we want to talk about theory, but with the panelists, we'll hear clear examples, and this may, awake more questions from the audience. Welcome, Andrea. I hope you can hear me okay. I don't know. I hear twice. Let me know if you can hear me. Thank you for inviting me. Manuel, the first one to invite me, but all of you for listening to me virtually. I wish I'd been there face to face. I'm proud to share this panel with Katherin and Fernando. We talked, and they are great professionals. And okay, I hope I can contribute to this with my grain of sand. AEDROS is an association of fundraisers. Those of us who procure funds, we try to get funds and develop resources. I'm going to be using financing collection, but they all mean the same, whether I refer to one or the other terms. I'm going to share my screen. See if we can start. Let me know if you can see it. You can see it, right? I'd like to say something short. I thought about the title called Innovative Strategies and Emerging Practices for Financial Sustainability. And maybe what I'm sharing is not very innovative for those of you who are already working on fund or fundraising. Maybe it'll be a different view for others, another way of working, things that you may have never heard of. So I hope I'll contribute. I'm going to start with 3 points that we always think are important, and it has to do with what do we mean by resource development. At AEDROS, the foundation is an organization, it's an association of executive to develop resources for social organizations. That's the acronym. So it's resource development more than fundraising or procuring funds. We call it fundraising because it's just shorter and it's the um, word that is usually used, but we like to call it like that because it's a process. It's a process by means of which an organization requests and manages the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. That the key is that we want to establish long-term relations, right? It happens that some organizations, whenever they get the donation from whatever source it is, that's it, right? They got it. And actually, it's not it. The key is that it's just the beginning. It's just beginning. So we need to keep that link. We need to build links. That's why we like to call it more than procure or funding or fundraising or access to funding. We call it resource development. Number two, important to the organizations, they need to understand that the fact that we are non-profit organizations, it doesn't mean that we are organizations aiming at losing, loss, seeking loss. We get funds, but we need to get the mind or set the mind on the mission of the objective. If we are successful and we got a surplus, the surplus, they are applied to the mission. So the surplus, or there's not really any surplus in the end. So there isn't anybody who gains profit home or their company, their business, because precisely it's not the goal, it's not the mission. That's why we are nonprofit. That doesn't mean that we're always, showing red figures, red balance. On the other hand, a third point that is also important to highlight and tends to be very different logic from the funding come from international cooperation. General terms, funding come from international cooperation are very restrictive because it's punctual specific. And the organizations, we need to gather two kinds of funds: the specific fund, the restricted ones, those that are for a specific project or program to fulfill our mission, and also the free availability funds, the funds for us to do whatever we want. No, these are the funds that help carry out our mission. How? By paying the expenses or costs that are not part of the project or any specific project, but they're fundamental to execute our mission. For example, the lease of the premises, of the facilities, the utilities, paying someone who is not part of the project, the funding they don't want to pay for salaries or fees. But with these free availability funds, available funds, we can pay those fees or salaries. So that's the path to sustainability and healthy finance in organization. It should be a balance between restricted funds and free or available funds. Now I'm going to talk about the topic of the panel, that is planning, resource development, and focus on the diversification. Taking a step back, what they say about restrictive funds and available funds, it tends to happen that the organizations, yes, they have resources, but then they do things. But unless they have resources, if they don't have resources, they don't do anything. They don't do programs. They don't fulfill their mission. If the donation comes, then we do this or that project. If we don't get the donation, we just leave it in standby and we disregard our mission, or to at least possible extent. We do work with the population. I'm going to talk about population because I understand that the organizations that are present in the Congress serve populations, communities, and people, but this is applicable to any kind of cause. It could be the environment, animals, any kind of area. Okay. The key here is that we should not think about whether we have resources and then we do something or we apply our funds and we do programs, but actually we should think the other way around, reverse. What is the mission of organization? What changes the organization? What changes do we want to achieve? What's the dream of organization and how do we manage it? That's our strategic plan. What do we want to do? Then the operational plan. How we're going to do that to make that change? How will we make that change? What actions do we need to develop to make that change? What we want to show based on our mission and what we want to achieve. And third, what resources do we need to carry out those actions? Okay? When it's the reverse path, then we know that we will need a given amount of financing for given programs, processes, and so on in our organization. And that's how we'll be able to come out to look for those resources in a more determined manner. It always happens too that the organizations, whenever they ask for funding or resources, they tend to say, whatever you can give us will be fine. With whatever you can help us, that'll be good. It's welcome. It's going to be fine. And actually, that goes against ourselves. Actually, with whatever they can help us for the organization, it's going to be positive. Now, if I don't know how to ask, they will not know that I need what I need as an organization. I need to be assertive. And what can happen is that the donor may say, no, not that much. We can negotiate how you can give, and then we can go and look for other resources, other sorts of financing. So this is how we ask assertively and professionally to build trust in our listener, because we're going to tell them we need this amount of dollars for X project for this number of people that will benefit with this project in this place, in this site, in this period of time. So the person who's listening understands that we know what we are getting or asking the money for, what we need it for, and what we're going to do with the money. After collecting, we need to understand clearly something that I'm going to list briefly. These are just some of the factors. There might be other things to consider, and this relates to, well, sometimes they call it whole truth, that we need to understand our mission, our values, of course, and sometimes it's not so clear. We need to know very well what our mission is, what our mission and visions are. Okay? We need to understand clearly that we've got the information and that we know it and we know how to act according to our mission, vision, and values, and then have everything in place that the organization may have all its issues, legal documentation in place. We need to be signed up as a formal organization. If we already have that, it has to be in good standing, the bylaws, administration, powers, everything about the legal concerns, the balance sheets, the P&L. We have to have a banking account under our name. That's also key. It seems something simple, but it's an Argentinian expression she's using. It might sound as something silly, but it's not. Who could donate money to an organization that doesn't even have a banking account? If the banking account is on a person's name, it would sound weird, right?
At least a donor would doubt, they would doubt of this organization being serious or not. Then we need to know about the human resources, who our volunteers are, who how are we going to apply or use those donations, follow up. We need to have our communication channels updated. We don't have to have all communications open. No, just those channels that we can maintain in the organization. If we're going to have a website, it has to be an updated website. If we have the news, the last picture cannot be old. It has to be something new, last week, last month, or that is happening this week. And if not, well, then just have it. It's not mandatory. So we need, the same thing happens with social networks. We want to have all social networks or social, TikTok, Instagram, but we don't have the audience that listens to those social networks, or we don't know how to keep them. Then we need to have updated database. We say sometimes we don't have any databases, so we need to start building a database that has at least name, last name, email, phone number, if possible, of all those people who are in our organization, starting with those closest to those who worked for us sometime in the past. If we haven't organized it, we need to start organizing, just like Manuel said, economic resources to invest, because we cannot collect without investing. We cannot collect money without uh, investing money. So we need to have donors policies, meaning what are we going to do with the donations? Where are we going? Where are we going to invest them in? We need to have the resource development plan. Once we have the operational plan, the strategic plan, then we need to have the resource development plan that is just like any other plan, any type of topic, in this case, specifically on resource development. So this presentation, everyone will have it. So I already mentioned this. We need to know that we are going to invest when resources need to be invested. And I'm going to give you a spoilers alert. The wizard does not exist. Like they said, there has to be patient. We need to start by investing in human resources, meaning the person who will collect the money. That magician doesn't exist. So there has to be economic sustainability for our mission. The person in charge is going to go out to search or seek resources, but they need information, they need input, they need the administrative area to be efficient, specifically in managing those resources, efficient and transparent, that we can communicate assertively what we do. That program areas, they provide information, for example, for project presentation, and then to revise it. In the organization, we are all responsible. Not everyone develops resources, but we're all responsible to produce resources, resource production or development. Something that is more evident in our current context, when USAID was closed and the cuts that have been in the world, it's diversifying financing sources. So we need to have different eggs in different baskets. So we need to broaden our vision from individuals, from companies, foundations, from the state in different levels, and international cooperation, different ways to start looking somewhere else. Private foundations that provide grants. We need to build brotherhoods with other organizations, let's say with churches, so on. There are a lot of opportunities. So what this does, I'm going to go to the end. This is the financing pyramid. The top, the fewest, the top is contributed by the fewest, but then the donations on the base of the pyramid should be sustained by so many individual donors that contribute contribute all the time, continuously, every month. So then we have the free availability funds. Let me advance. The key, like I said, do not use all financing sources. Do not depend on the only one. We already know what the consequences are. We are living this. Take advantage of the opportunities that come up. Grow organically as an organization. An important point is to innovate and evolve. Here, I'd like to make a division, and talk about innovation. Innovation and evolving. Always being creative, but your feet on the floor. Inventing new things. We should not stop doing what already works. We need to sustain what works in our organizations. We should not have a different strategy to the one that already works. If it does, then I give small steps, pilot steps. I have trial and error pilots, small steps, controlled steps, so that we continue growing little by little in other types of financing. Patience, like Manuel said, tolerance to frustration, and the final recommendations in this space is always diversify, have clear objectives, and reachable objectives, not go far. Invest with intelligence. This is very important. And we need to start little by little, and we need to focus on bringing new donors and loyalty. Retain those who are already our donors. Start controlled pilots and measure return on the investment so that we can use our resources. I'll stop here and I'll stop sharing, and I pass on the floor to my colleagues. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much. Now, let's ask Katherin. Katherin, can you please share from Medics Without Borders? Doctors Without Borders, thank you for the invitation and for this space. Since time is short, I'll start. I am the person in charge of collection of funds for Doctors Without Borders. This is a humanitarian international organization. Technical problems. All right, I was telling you that Doctors Without Borders is a humanitarian international organization. We are an NGO, non-profit NGO. We provide humanitarian action in very specific contexts, such as catastrophes, natural disasters, armed conflicts and war, endemics, pandemics, and forgotten illnesses without any type of distinction or because of ethnics, religion, or political ideology. Doctors Without Borders is based on 7 principles, on which we highlight 3. When we collect funds, those principles are independence, impartiality, and neutrality. These are key pillars so that we can collect funds and invest correctly. The organization was founded in 1971 and is present in over 70 countries around the world, more than 500 projects going on. In Colombia, the UNICEF office is part of the UNICEF flag actions. This is a multi-country section that has coverage in South America, in Spanish-speaking countries. We have 4 offices in MS Flag. They are located in Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, and Chile. What are they in charge of? 3 things. 1, recruiting trained staff for operations, for missions. Another one is to provide knowledge for humanitarian crisis, the context we're in. And the third one, what calls me, is to collect funds for the organization. So Colombia is a very specific country for Doctors Without Border because one of the fewest worlds that has both operations, meaning a mission office that has projects, operations on the field, but it also has the representation office that is in charge of the 3 things that I told you, specifically about collecting funds. It's not common in the world to find one country that has both needs. I mean, having operations because of the interventions the organization conducts, and at the same time being able to contribute economically to our cause. Let me tell you about funds collections from Colombia. We have our area is subdivided into 3 areas. So massive acquisition, loyalty, strategic collaboration. This is the corporate area or the one-to-one area that we know. And all of this is massive acquiring. So we go to the individuals market. Like Andrea mentioned, we diversify channels in Colombia. The most representative ones in terms of new partners and donors, we have the digital channel, we have the face-to-face channel or one-to-one relations, and everything that is related to reconquering or those people that at some point in time were not there, we contacted them so that they can go back and they can contribute economically or to the movement. And we also have advertisement on TV. So we invite people to add up to this cause. In the loyalty process, it is very important to have the communication journey. This is the communication flow with our partners and donors. When the massive acquisition, we need to be very clear and get to know what Doctors Without Borders is, how it operates, what contexts they intervene in, why we need people to add to this cause and have this structure awareness process. In the loyalty process, we need to remain the link or keep the link when we had the acquisition process. So it is important to highlight all the communications with our partners and donors so that they know how money is being invested, the money that they invest, how it is operating in terms of accountability, and this includes all the retention loyalty process. Our rate is high. Most organizations, we do have that same context. And the whole collection process, Andrea mentioned that we have everything related to payment means, the way people can conduct donations, and they do it with full trust. This country does not have this strong or developed collection culture. Historically, it is used to receiving funds, receiving support more than providing it or creating that awareness. So this is one of the invitations to all of you. Andrea said it. We should not be afraid of measuring. If we have a good invitation, awareness process, and we tell donors, so if they join this cause and what contributions they do through this, how those changes are represented in the future, I think that it could be another context inside the country. The third area, a new area for Doctors Without Borders, is strategic collaboration, and this is based on searching donors, companies, foundations, people who can donate more than the average in the massive market. Delegates is not well known in our country, but at international levels, it has a lot of potential for resource collection. So the idea is to build this close link with our partners and donors, develop it, and they are completely convinced of the change they are making possible through their contribution. This is our key pillar in collection, that is financial independence. We have independence, neutrality, and impartiality. Independence is what makes us autonomous as to how we invest donations we receive for our cause. So for Colombia, our income, 98%, comes from private funds, partners, donors, contributions, companies, corporations. This is what lets us make decisions independently, decide when, where we need to invest without having pressure. Sometimes they condition help or aid. This is expenditures and right in the middle. Many people, we need the investment process to be able to have fund collections. So as part of all the income received by Doctors Without Borders at the international level, they make sure that 80% at least of the income is going to social mission, meaning to all projects on the field, everything related to the activities of Doctors Without Without Borders in the world. There is this percentage of 15% that is fund collection, and is this investment that we need to be able to get to know what we do so that we can have new donors, partners, we can have loyalty, retention, collection, and we can maintain, sustain the operation. 5% of general expenses, administrative expenses. This was one of the questions Manuel asked us. How can we make collection a reality in Colombia? I already mentioned everything about massive individual donors. This is the big base of Doctors Without Borders in Colombia, but there are other alternatives for collection. So we see opportunities in the corporate fundraising. Like I told you, we have some restrictions to receive funds from certain organizations to keep our independence, to keep our impartiality and neutrality. But we know that there are some companies in the sector that are a lot more interested in participating in these social donation processes. So we see all the initiatives, solidarity initiatives, and we see this. We have these types of social events that are combined with a social area to collect funds for a specific cause. Crowdfunding, these are virtual platforms that can create your own campaign and make it at the disposal for those people that want to add to this cause, and they can donate particular amounts to add up. So we handle this too, but I know that they can leverage fund collection. This is in-kind donations so that you can diminish expenses in the operation if someone donates them, and everything that is related to volunteer activities. Those that have their labor at the disposal of a foundation and they want to add up to this cause, donating their time in kind. All right. So something that I want to tell you about collection, fundraising, even if it's small, big, or mid-sized organization, we need to keep in mind this, what I told you, awareness process. We need to let people know what our work is about, what our project is about, why we need those resources, What are we going to do with those resources? What are the expected results, those that we want to give to our donors and partners? Make use of the information that we have. Data analysis, profiling of those possible donors. We need to know who we're going to talk to, how we need to talk to them. Sometimes we speak with that very technical language, or we love acronyms, and then when we speak, no one understands. So we need to ease conversations with possible donors so that they understand our needs and they want to add to this cause. Indicator measurement, Andrea mentioned it. IRR, we have our return on the investment. So all of this must have a return. I cannot just spend because I thought the campaign was nice or something, but I need to have the return on the investment indicators so that I can measure my campaign, whether it is successful or not, whether I need to make adjustments, how the campaign is working. Build community and contact networks. Many of the doors that are opening are because of this, because someone told them about us. It's word of mouth, right? They know our work, they can be interested in the process. So it's important to keep our community informed, our contacts. So if we have a specific need, we need to share with them. We need so that people can add up if they have the possibility of doing this. Legal fiscal aspects. The corporate fundraising. Well, many companies need a donation certificate. They need something in exchange because of their donation process. And this is important to keep it clear. So that's one of our advantages when we address this. And I also mentioned transparency and accountability. This is key so that any partner is convinced that their contribution is well invested to what they want to be destined to, and they're making a significant change in the life of many people. I want to tell you as well that with these spaces, we can create fundraising community. We can share good practices. These are processes that are not easy at all. This looks really pretty and sounds really pretty, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, collaboration, development. For things to work, we've tried them or tested them so many times. I'm coming from a multi-country session. And some things work perfectly in one country, but not in my country. So test, try things, have pilots, keep those tips that we're sharing with you, and don't be afraid of collecting because it's a very pretty process. Thank you. Thank you, Katherin. Very interesting information you have shared with us. I think the challenge turns a lot clearer. Now, Fernando. He will speak about actions, applications, and how we can take it to reality. Everything that we have seen so far through Andrea and Katherin. Fernando, you have the floor. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to synthesize things and not to speak from the experience of the foundation I direct, but the experience from other foundations, consultancies, because of different experiences, okay? So, Andrea has shared something that is key, the concept base, without which one can understand and these things. Katherin tells us about professionalization of a global organization. It's important to say that this part of those scenarios we are now in, and we're saying, okay, where do we go now? So everything has a process. So some things I'm gonna go fast, I will stop on others. So in case there is a space, Manuela, so if we can have a conversation, it'd be great. And we can address questions or comments that we all have. Innovative mechanisms. This is not linked with this presentation. Let's see. Let's see. It's not advancing. While we solve this, oh, that's it. You tell me and I'll do it, because probably, or let's try it and see. I'm bringing here an analogy. We all handle Excel, some better than others. I particularly can say that I just have 15 functions only in Excel, others that know a lot more. But just to give you that there are 527 functionalities in Excel. The question is, how many functionalities are we using to fund our organizations? And this is part of what Katherin has told us, what Andrea has told us, what Manuel introduced. And we think about the following. So we have Andrea's little pig was fat and it was getting full. This one is more realistic. The situation is sometimes critical. Let's look at our piggy. Andrea said it as well. This was not a deliberate conversation. These are topics that can become coincidence based on what happens. We've said so many times, we don't want to go for loss. But then where is the strategy, the funding strategy? Where is it? Where is the strategy? What can we do so that this actually works? Because it's easy to say, resources scarcity, USAID close, etc., but that's not new. That's just like saying that in Bogota, the weather is weird. Well, there's nothing new about that. So what's important is to mention that organizations do have financial sustainable stability after 3 or 5 years after they have systematic funding or financing. I have found organizations that are 15, 20 years old and invaluable knowledge of what they do, but they are just starting to ask themselves, how can we have a financing plan? It's welcome to ask ourselves and to start building it, but we need to start. Like we said, it all has an origin. So then the question is, we do it this year? Should we leave it for next year? Are we really busy? Are we so full of tasks in the field? So there is this key equation. Technical capacity is the reason of being, is the heart of what we do. But without financial capacity, we cannot have the organization sustainability. It's difficult sometimes to appropriate. Many, including myself, we're passionate about field work, project execution, but then we forget that triangle, financing triangle, project management, resource management, alliance management. That is a triangle. If we don't have the first two, we don't have the third one. And then each one of those three, it needs one another. So that's why this equation is key. My colleagues have already said it. We need to invest. We need to invest in financing, whether if it's portals, if it's advisory, staff, training, or any of the above. But without that, we don't have a feasible equation for the organization. We've already said this, financing channels. So which one or which to prioritize? Okay, so we have Doctors Without Borders. Do I feel that I like that one? I mean, do they receive resources from one or others? I mean, you see all those channels here. They're not feasible for all organizations. So some channels match, others don't. Opportunity cost. Cooperation is slow. It requires hours to formulate a project that has n number of requirements, so it's not feasible for me as an organization. Others would say, yes, it is for me. It does work. So each has its particularities. A collection experience. So if we're having collection experience, it's not advisable just to go to a public bid or to look for public resources from a state, let's say a national government or a local government, because it is burdensome. Better to use other mechanisms. So, Katherin spoke about crowdfunding, funding. So if I want to finance a project that is $500,000, I'm not going to go to crowdfunding, because crowdfunding will probably give me probably $15,000, $20,000, but not 500,000. Those 500,000 could be in cooperation. So everything depends on where I am standing to know what channel I should use.
And to know what time. We also it's a matter of patience. If we go to Asian cooperation, the disbursements may take 18 months, 24 months, and up to 3 years. So it's not the right channel to go to. If we talk about flexibility, maybe the channel personas or persons or services may be the right channel. It might be relevant. It depends on the perspective and the reality we live as an organization. Okay, I'd like to touch on this. Whoever keeps doing the same, well, we can call it stopborn, right? It's nonsense. We can just manage resources as we did 30 years ago. Our region, Latin America, is located today. It's in a very different from position from what it was 30 years ago. And if we talk about the perspective from cooperation, the focus is not on Latin America. Maybe it's in Syria, Ukraine, North Korea, North Africa, so the north of Africa. So how can we do this differently? And how do we think about this? Things that go beyond the famous application to grants from international cooperation. So the landscape is pretty wide, so we understand this context much better. This organization is an example of an organization that I joined. It's in El Salvador. And notice this, 91 proposals were submitted. You live there, right? And we all live it. What it is to submit a international cooperation proposal, a structured project. Just think of 5. Think 91 of them. So regardless of the statistics on the rates and all of that, the issue is, how do we stop doing the same and we start to diversify? I think that's the key word that we have mentioned, the 4 of us have mentioned. We talk about diversification more than a comment or a sexist comment. With all due respect, let's think of a more feminine logic, more multi-actor, multi-stakeholder, more functional, and then apply, just apply to grants. I get some, I lose some, others I don't get a response, I apply again, and then I get another one and I apply it again and they don't answer. So we need to break that paradigm, and we need to be much more systemic or systematic to understand not just international cooperation and development, but financing that entails all of these channels that we've discussed. I want to mention 2 important elements. For example, do things differently. Digital marketing. There's an organization here that we work with on it, and it's to take advantage of the potential, speaking of monetization in the social media and the social marketing, what we do. That's the other element that's included there. So how do we take advantage of marketing, traditionally speaking, for social elements that may help us manage resources and mobilize financing and monetize action? And that's how you think of it, with a different logic. I'd like to mention a final example. This is called More Than 3 Letters. It serves individuals who live with HIV, positive HIV, and that's why it's called More Than 3 Letters. That's the name. And the first thing they said when we began to work with them was this: Fernando, we want to manage all types of resources, but not from cooperation. Not from cooperation. Wow, interesting challenge, because the first thing you think as an organization, especially in humanitarian context, is cooperation. And the first thing they said, no, we want everything but cooperation. talk about anything else you can think of, but not cooperation. So in that context, well, a lot of ideas came up because they said we don't want to wear us out putting projects together, wait for 6 months, not get an answer. They might get an answer, but say that we need to make changes, that they just tell us that the email, thank you for participating. No, that's not what we're interested in, especially this organization, this specific one. We want to do this differently. And then things came up as what we show. Institutional services they offered or offer at the moment, they since they're so good and they're such good communicators and they are very contemporary to us, but they think they are millennials. So it's okay, we do this digital, we never meet, we don't have an office. Okay, fine. All right. So since they took advantage of this and they have an interesting team for digital marketing, they said, okay, we're going to offer ourselves as a means, as an agency of the media for the organizations that are related to us whenever they need services to position themselves to run digital campaigns, then we can provide that service. And there's that the second line that's very successful to them to get financing. Sales with a purpose. We've heard this, we've seen it. Of course, we need to have a price structure and it's got to be clear. What's that called? The sales with a purpose. Purposeful sales. We're going to call it more than a store. If we're called more than 3 letters, then this program is more than a store. And then we know a little bit about that logic. We're not buying a t-shirt. You're supporting a cause. Okay? Big scale example could be UNICEF, right? Maybe we all remember the famous Christmas cards. Those are the sales with a purpose or purposeful sales. Big organizations do this. WWF ran an amazing campaign. It was very successful in Russia. Okay, they mixed a bunch of things, AI, augmented reality, and so on, with that work scheme. Mass events of all sorts. They run concerts. They get artists who believe in their cause. They rely on celebrities, sports people, and so on to run different activities that lead them to get funds massively and individual. And they have a rate of volunteers and peers. They leverage the activity they do, but they also reduce costs and maximize the resources they need to operate. So, having said that, I want to leave it like that to see if there are comments and we can talk about realities or concerns. Thank you, Fernando. We want to thank each of you. As we said from the beginning, should there be questions from the audience, please voice it. Doubts, concerns. Thank you very much. I'm Lisa. I'm participating on behalf of the NIAR network in Latin America. I'm a little bit confused with the presentation because the title of the title where we're at, Innovative Strategies and Emerging Practices for Financial Sustainability of Localization. And after listening to these presentations, I went to the document by the agency in their meeting to review the Global Compact in Geneva. And I think we need to reread the objectives of that movement. And I'm going to read a piece which says that as national organizations, international NGOs, we recognize that we have to improve and accelerate efforts to transform the organizational culture, the practices and the behaviors that form the way we work and deal with local actors. Many times, I believe, we can say be the translation, right? But this document is translated in Spanish and English. And we're now talking about financing for assistance. we're not talking about assistance here. We're talking about increasing the capacities of local organizations to increase their efficiency and their effectiveness and respond to needs. So I'm very interested in, you know, in being here and to listen to a presentation, but then I get confused because it's different. Then I got some passages from it. What do we seek with this great bargain with localization? We have flexible, pluriannual, increase the quality and the efficiency of the programs and the number of resources and more transparency. So, asking this question, how do we contextualize this presentation in these other wider factors? We're trying just to bring alliances and efforts together so that we all increase our capacities and we can respond to the most urgent needs of the population we interact with. So that's the question I was wondering, why do you call it assistance? And they talk about support. So words, concepts are important because we are also dignifying the work of the local organizations. And I believe that we are capable, and we've been capable to survive different moments in different contexts in Latin America, in this case, and well, in the Caribbean. However, we are going through one more crisis, and I don't doubt that we're going to be able to overcome the crisis and come out with collective efforts. Partnerships continue to be key and relevant. We need to see now how we should encourage the partnerships. We have short time, and to have a time to answer, I want to know if there are more questions, and then we close and we answer. Thank you. This is a question for Fernando. I don't know if, based on your experience, you can tell us how to sort out a challenge, something that organizations face when we apply to state funds, because the state has some requirements, and one of the requirements is the financial indicators. The financial indicators, well, since we are nonprofit organizations, the cash indicator, that's always zero, right? It's always negative, right? So what do you recommend based on your experience to have that as one of the arguments, or if it's an issue of outreach? I mean, for us to contact the state and the state agencies that they ask for financial performance indicators, how to approach that? Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to start with the question about Lisa. Question from Lisa about the panel that we're having. I think it may create confusion. On the other hand, I think it's important to understand clearly that this is a means to an end for what we are seeking, what you just read to us, that is in the convention. It's not different from what we are explaining here, trying to explain. It's a means to reach an end that you were suggesting. But now, there's diversity. So, from that perspective and along that path, I think the organization of this Congress precisely considered those chances. So, through these panels, we can give an answer with concrete applications to the concerns that have been exposed as a conceptual starting framework. So that's the point. I'm going to let Fernando see if he can say something. Thank you. Okay. I want to highlight your comment and I'm going to respond with a concern. Like all discussions in Geneva, they are aspirational, right? They're really important, they're key. The challenge is how do you land them? But I highlight what you said, and I mean assistance and it's or aid. It's probably not a minor thing because that gives us a connotation as how do we play with the financing and when we said not to do more of the same and not to think like we thought 30 years back. We have the Paris Declaration, the Paris Statement is already 20 years old, that they don't talk about aid but assistance, and someone can talk about alliances. So it's a logic where we must think that it's not just, as we usually say in a region, just to place your hat to see who gives you a coin like it happened 4 years ago, but rather how do we partner? How do we bring efforts together? How do we offer potential? Even the organizations themselves. That's why we talk about services, and services are not just, it's not merchandise, not to turn into goods as we are big consulting firm such as Price Waterhouse, but how do we support one another as an organization, even local governments or other stakeholders to potentialize what we're doing? That's a service logic and to bring added value that we learned in comparison to others. And that's very different. It's very far away from the concept of that connotation of aid as we had it before, as much as humanitarian as it may sound. I can tell you that the foundation I lead, we work on inclusion, but the discourse is focused on a quality education because we need to have a clear view on the humanitarian context and development, how we move from one to the other. That's why Latin America is not, I mean, in spite of the fact that the challenges continue to exist, we do not ignore that at all. But we are not in the logic of the humanitarian need, the basic humanitarian need. Okay. I think Katherin can tell us more about this. She knows the context from Doctors Without Borders for the planet. So it's important, and it's not let's to think of this logic. How do we become actors of development, even though we look at humanitarian concerns and not think, on our own, or why do we deserve aid from external bodies? Because that's the clear logic that doesn't work anymore. And it ignores our work as organizations. So that's how I would see it. Now, about the other comment or question, yes, state contracts are thought to ensure that companies, organizations, profit or companies, they apply to these countries to be awarded resources. So it's the second thing you said. Some outreach capacity to say you cannot measure us with the same meter or the same, let's say, parameters to measure a company, a business, because we're nonprofit. So there are stages where they can clarify, ask questions, and so on. That's where you need to contact and do outreach to bring the indexes down, or how to remove those conditions, the financial conditions that are not applicable to a nonprofit organization. So I think that's the logic you can use, and it can also work in more structured mechanisms, maybe to partner, build a partnership, a solid partnership with an organization that has that expertise, or they are international bodies that do not have that limitations of the financial indicators that we are asked to produce. So it could be two ways to request that, and then I can say look for public funds without so many hurdles, but some specific use resources. There are other mechanisms that are available, not in all cases, but in some cases where you can access those funds as well. Okay. Is there another question? Good morning. I'm Liliana Zamudio from the Pastoral Social Cáritas Colombia organization. First, I'd like to say that the information we have been giving is very, very valuable. Okay, I don't think anybody's saying that this information is useless. But I feel like you do. I mean, this term localization means or implies those of us in the humanitarian sector that we have a political assessment of our work. Yeah. The Spanish girl said something silly. To us, localization is not as financing. It's not the same thing. It means, yes, it implies financing, but localization is mechanism we use to relate to the humanitarian sector to give support or assistance to what we do in humanitarian terms. So when we are given these titles such as innovation, new ways to see how localization is being thought differently, well, just to look at the dimension of the financial matters, I don't think, well, it's enough. I think it's reduced. I think localization from Cáritas that we represent where we work with 78 jurisdictions, 78 territories. It means that we take a look at that localization in the territories, okay? Those territories where access, arrival of assistance, and the humanitarian action have access issues. They have security issues. There are stigmatization issues, and there, in that context, that's how we need to apply localization, and we need to be innovative, not only in the sense of financing, but the whole articulation. And I'm gonna say something is that in some localization scenarios, what we're doing is just to be competitive. Okay, we are these humanitarian actors are competing against one another. We should be solidarious, we should be articulated, and we should be acting in a localized fashion with the territory uh, stakeholders. We're actually, or instead, we are competing over resources. So, yeah, very nice to diversify and all, but in humanitarian action, we must be innovative not to fall in this competition, to have access to territories, to be of true support to humanitarian assistance. It was just a reflection because I think localization is much more. I mean, yeah, of course, we need the money, of course. Very important, all the information you gave us. But I think this Congress, and especially with the word localization, the framework of humanitarian aid, we need to increase the debate and bring it up to a political and articulation sense. They should give us the tools so that the humanitarian stakeholders, the humanitarian architecture may innovate, especially in that scenario where the resources and the context is different. We're in a context that poses challenges, and hopefully there won't be competition but articulation and coordination. Thank you.
Thank you, Liliana. Any other questions? I understand the question from the audience. Probably we need to have the everything that it's integral within this variable that it's more complex. It has its particularities. Not to collect funds for any social organization. I think that that's the question. We have this purpose, we have this commitment with this principle that are not neutral. It's not standard. So I understand her concern. Something that was left in my mind is an element the colleague mentioned, the need of profiling donors or donors, the traditional ones, international cooperation, or the new donors. Because there is reputation there. We could not just receive money from anyone. So probably we do not have all the tools to scan the, each of our potential donors, but there are people who are, drug traffickers, and they just want to launder their assets, and then they say, oh, I'm going to donate to a good organization that has been doing amazing things for so many years in the world. So how can we overcome this threat? I just want to make a comment. I think that the whole Congress has that seal called localization. Yesterday, today, what's still coming, it's being handled. I mean, all the different aspects that are related to localization. So I think comments are good. I would like to add only is that this part of the fundraising, fund collection, well, it's an innovative strategy. There is this possibility for localization. And what you said as a question, well, according to Katherin, so even for the Catholic Church, when they receive the donor from an older lady and gives $10 and he takes them, he says, priests say, I don't know if the lady gave me that money and her son helped her, and the son is in the world, is part of the world of drugs. Very complex. There are means, mechanisms in cooperation or organizations that are related to this. There are ways. We need to innovate. We need to look at the possibilities of ensuring this and not just fall into this other side, what's not correct, what's not clean. To answer your question, it is more complex to receive funds from someone who do not know. We do not know, because when we talk about taxes, when we talk about legalisms, you need to demonstrate who the person is, the one that is giving you the donation. So as organizations, we need to be more strict to establish our own policies and to have it clear, make it clear who we can receive funds from and who we cannot receive funds from. Bigger organizations, international ones, platforms that can have specific searches, even with AKAs, documents, specifically shows a list of close people that put their name to conduct those processes. But the basic way of doing it is requesting specific information, all the Chamber of Commerce, the tax identification document, all this to know who you're speaking, who you're facing, and if within your organization you have this list of money laundering or those people who have a different category you're not going to receive funds from, this process should always be done. Pre-validate the donation to get to know and be at ease that it can be received or not. In this case, we cannot receive donations we don't know where they come from, because the tax authority in Colombia, DIAN, requests our declaration, who our donors are. Beyond receiving that money, what it means to us is a reputational risk, because if we don't know who the person is, the donor, who the donor is, we can go into reputational legal risks. Andrea would like to tell us something about the question. Andrea, can you hear us? Yes, I'm here. I'm listening carefully to all the participations. So I wanted to share my experience. I am in AEDROS. I worked for 10 years in Cáritas Argentina's doing having resource development, and I clearly understand that fundraising from the Catholic Church is not the same thing as getting fundraising from any other organization. I've lived it for a long time. So everything that is related to strategies, the ways of fundraising, the funding, that's the same. The way we address is different. And Catholic Church, and I know that it exceeds those that participate in this gathering or this congress. And this is in other places in church. So there are certain prerogatives. For example, in Argentina, some time ago, the church did not have the same demands as an NGO. Any NGO, those of us who do resource development and just serve, looking at this question that it was asked, is not positive. On the contrary, I completely agree with what Katherin said. We need to actually take care of our logos, let's say, our institutions inside the church, just as any organization, and then so that is not wrongly used or politically used or to be involved in a crime. In every country, we would have to find out what the mechanisms are, the ones that established. So we have the Fiscal Information Unit in Argentina. In Argentina, it's actually the, well, we organizations need to provide information about the origins, where we got the funds. We need to ask our donors the sworn declaration of the funds from certain amounts up, those that could be questionable. And what we need to pay attention to is to us as organizations not to be used for other purposes. So what is relevant and important, what I tell you, is to have institutional policies. What type of donations we are going to receive, who we receive them from, who we articulate with and who we don't. So vision, mission, values of organization are need to be queried along with the governance body in organization. Let's say, I don't know, the committee, the national committee, the president of the organization, well, the governance board, whatever name it is established jointly, and it should be applied in each case. That on the one hand. On the other hand, and someone mentioned the competence, for funds, competitors. Well, all organizations have our own public. Besides diversifying is to speak so that they donate to us. Some countries like in Spain, for example, we have the Spanish Committee of Emergencies where different organizations collect or they fundraise as a group for a specific emergency, and then it's divided up to with certain criteria. So there are experiences of certain consortia that have joint actions. Therefore, they need a mature sector to sit down to speak with peers and negotiate how far one receives, how far one gives, in what situation one fundraises or collects or the other one, and to maintain or keep those agreements. There's a lot of work, joint work, sectoral work, dialogue. If they're interested in knowing that experience, if any of you is interested, you let me know through Manuel, and I'll pass on the floor, and will pass the contact with the Spanish person that I'm telling you. So in case you want to learn about consortia, it's not easy, but it is possible. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you all for your attention. Yes, Let's hear it. Hear it for this participation, this collaboration we've seen. Andrea, thank you for joining virtually. Fernando, Katherin, Manuel, for having moderated this panel with this strategy. Sustainability is one of the big concerns we've spoken from yesterday. So we are going to show again our QR. Let's reinforce participation, contributions, because this will be part of this panel. So remind you to help us. So we're gonna have lunch now. Those who are joining virtually, we'll see you back here in 1 hour at 1 p.m. Colombia time. And then we start the streaming again of our second Congress of Humanitarian Action in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2025. Here, all right?
Colaboración, por favor, para salir de la sala. Muchas gracias a quienes están conectados y nos vemos a la 1 de la tarde.